Gobble gobble. In today's video, I'm going to go through Denon's X series of AVRs and help you figure out which one is the right one for you. Now, before we begin, I want to make sure everybody knows there is still a Black Friday deal running for the Spatial Audio Calibration Toolkit. Use the code DENON15 to get 15% off till Friday night, 11:59 Pacific. So I hope you're going to have a day filled with family, friends, and laughter, and enough turkey to make you pass out. And before you pass out, you can also check out these deals on AV receivers from Denon and Best Buy. They've got some crazy deals that I was actually pretty impressed by. So let's get into the AVRs. The Denon X1800H is an AV receiver that can process and power 7 channels at a time. It supports immersive audio formats such as Dolby Atmos and DTS:X. The X1800H has 6 HDMI inputs, 3 of which have support for 8K signals. For those of you that want to game on a console like an Xbox Series X or PS5, this is what you're going to look for. There is one HDMI output which supports eARC if you are attempting to connect a TV and use the TV's inbuilt apps. For streaming, you'll have eARC support, so it's only going to be one cable, which will work in both directions. All HDMI inputs and outputs support HLG, HDR10, HDR10 Plus, and Dolby Vision. With the X1800H, you also get support for auto low latency mode, quick frame transport, and variable refresh rate. You get 2 analog inputs along with a phono stage for a turntable as well. So the X1800H is rated at 80 watts per channel with a full bandwidth signal with 2 channels driven. I did say this is a 7-channel AV receiver, so when you connect up all 7 channels, you will not be getting 80 watts per channel. We don't actually know how much power is going to each of the 7 speakers, but you're definitely not going to get 80 per speaker. So don't be fooled by that. Now, who is this for? If you are finally wanting to get into the world of Dolby Atmos, let's say you have an AV receiver that was a 5.1 or a 7.1 from years ago, and you want to get an upgrade and you've heard what Atmos is about and you want to get into it, this is definitely a good option. Let's check the pricing right now at Best Buy. So the price of the X1800H is $549. Now, this is not a bad deal. If you're thinking there are Denons that you've seen for less, that is the S series of AV receivers from Denon, and I would highly recommend staying away from those. If you want to know why, let me know in the comments. I would be happy to make a video about it because I do have an S series here in-house along with an X series that I can compare for you guys. Moving up to the next AVR in the series brings us to the Denon X2800H. Now, it's going to take everything the X1800H has and gives you more of it. It is still a 7-channel processing and 7-channel powering AV receiver, and it supports the same immersive audio formats like Dolby Atmos and DTS:X. It has the same number of HDMI inputs, 3 of which are also still dedicated for 8K support, with support for all HDR formats and support for eARC. The 2800 also has support for auto low latency mode, variable refresh rate, and quick media switching. The X2800H also brings an additional 2 analog inputs for those that need it, along with a bump in power from 80 watts per channel, 2 channels driven, to 95 watts for 2 channels driven. So who is this AVR for? If you have a couple extra analog pieces of gear that you need to plug in, or you wanted a little bump in power, again, that is a 2-channel rating from 80 watts to 95 watts per channel, then maybe you would think about the X2800H. Let's check out pricing on Best Buy. On Best Buy's site, it says it's retailing for $11.99 and you get it for $9.99, so 299 cents off. However, if you have a Best Buy membership, you actually save another $14. You can see here, I am a Plus member and the Plus member price is $984.99. So with the membership, you save $15. So that's definitely a good thing. All right, let's move on. Now, the first 2 receivers we looked at, the X1800H and the X2800H, are great for those that want to dip their toes into Atmos. They are able to set up a 5.1.2 Dolby Atmos configuration, meaning they have 5 ear level speakers and 2 height channels. Moving into the next tier is the X3800H. And here's where we started to see a lot of changes. And instead of processing and powering an equal amount of channels, this one is different. Unlike the X1800H and the 2800H, the 3800H will process 11 channels, but power 9 channels. So here we get a big jump in functionality. So what does this mean? This means that you can run 9 channels of Dolby Atmos or DTS:X out of the box without any additional equipment. In addition, you also have the ability to connect 4 subwoofers to the 3800, whereas you can only connect 2 to the 2 lower models, the 1800 and 2800. Now with this AV receiver out of the box, you can run a 9-channel Atmos or DTS:X setup with 5 ear level speakers and 4 height channels, or 7 ear level speakers and 2 height channels. That's really, really cool. Now that's without any additional equipment. Now there is something the 3800 and above, all these receivers above, will allow you to do. You can actually power 2 extra channels externally to now make this AV receiver process and power 11 channels. Yes, you will have to buy an additional amplifier, but that is something you can do down the line if you feel like upgrading. Now, when we move to the 3800H, we also get more immersive audio formats. In addition to Dolby Atmos and DTS:X, we also get Auro 3D and IMAX Enhanced. And another exciting feature is the ability to run 6 height channels with 5 ear level speakers. As far as HDMI inputs are concerned, you still get the 6. However, all 6 support 8K resolutions and 4K 120 for gaming. So you're not confined to the 3 as the previous AVRs. And you actually get 3 HDMI outputs with this one. One of them is going to be your main, which will support eARC. The second one will be monitor 2 for whatever is coming out of the main HDMI. And you'll get a third one that is for Zone 2. Along with that, we do get an additional analog stereo input. We also get another digital coaxial input. There is also a trigger output for connecting an external power amplifier, and of course the expanded pre-out section. Now the pre-out section will allow you to connect a power amplifier to any of those speakers you see there. You can just connect 2 to get the 11 channels, or you can power all 11 channels externally with this pre-out section. And that's what I had in my previous home using the X3800H. I had 2 power amplifiers externally powering all my speakers. And as for power output, the X3800 gets a 10-watt increase over the 2800, bringing it to 105 watts per channel with 2 channels driven. So it's not that big of an upgrade for power output. However, there are a lot more features that come with the 3800H, so don't worry about that power difference being so little. So who is the X3800 for? If you've had an AV receiver for a long time and you've been running even a 7-channel Dolby Atmos setup, or just a 5.1 or a 7.2 or whatever the case is, if you wanted to move up to an AV receiver that has 4 height channels, I highly recommend the Denon X3800H. I've used it for months and it is a fantastic performer with powering all 9 channels from the internal box or the internal amplifiers, and using the external amplifiers. This also does very well as a processor. So on Best Buy's site, this does say Black Friday deal, so I'm sure that this will end Friday night. So make sure you get your orders in before that. I have links to all this stuff down in the description. Now the price for the 3800 is $12.99. Coincidentally, guys, these are the prices we had back before COVID. So when all the electronics shot up in price, these were the original prices. The 3600 and the 3700 were being sold for $1,300. So this is huge right now that they are back to that price for Black Friday. If you've been waiting to get an AVR and move up to something that does 4 height channels, this is the time to get your hands on an X3800H. As you can see, it's $400 off and the sale will end Friday night. So jump on it. So again, the X3800 brings a lot to the table. And when you consider the price difference of $1,000 for the 2800 to $1,300 to the X3800, I kind of think it's a no-brainer if you can afford that swing to just jump into the 3800 altogether for the first thing that you buy. It's a little tough. If you're considering the 2800, you should definitely consider the 3800 with the Black Friday sale that's happening right now at Best Buy. All right, let's take it up another notch to the Denon X4800H. Now with this one, we get everything the 3800H has, and we're adding on top of it. So we do get the same 9 channels of power, but 11 channels of processing. And if you wanted to run an 11-channel Atmos setup, you would need a 2-channel amplifier to make that happen. So this is the same as the X3800H. And yes, that does mean you can still run a 6 height channel setup with 5 ear level speakers with the 4800 as well, just like you could on the 3800. The immersive audio formats are still the same as well: Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, Oro 3D, and IMAX Enhanced, also with the 4800H. Now, one of the things you're going to notice right off the bat is the front fascia. We now have a sleeker look and a minimalistic design with just the 2 knobs on either side, the display in the middle, and just underneath the display, we have a fold down panel which hides all the buttons on the front. Now, this is a big jump from the X3800H, so you get a better look in your AV rack, or if it's in your living room, it will look a little bit sleeker than the lower models. The 4800 does include an extra HDMI input, so we have a total of 7 HDMI inputs that support 8K. There are 3 HDMI inputs: the one main that supports eARC, the second monitor, which mirrors the main, and we have an HDMI output for Zone 2 as well. And just like the X3800H, the 4800H also supports 4 subwoofers and 11 channels of pre-out for external amplification. Now the 4800 does have a total of 3 trigger outputs compared to the 3800's single trigger output. What is this for, and what does this mean? Well, if you're going to attach an external amplifier, you need a way to turn on the external amplifier. And the trigger output sends a signal when you turn on the AV receiver. It sends a signal to the external power amp to turn it on. If you wanted to run multiple amplifiers with the Denon X3800H, you would have to take the one trigger output, go into the external amplifier, if and only if that amplifier had an output as well. However, if you have amplifiers that only have a trigger input and not a trigger output, maybe the X4800 is better for you since it has 3 trigger outputs as opposed to the 3800's single. Another interesting thing to note on the back panel of the 4800 is the addition of composite and component video input. These legacy connections in the upper right-hand corner do not exist on any other AV receivers below the 4800 in the Denon X lineup. And as for power output, the X4800H has 20 more watts per channel in 2-channel driven as opposed to the 105 in the 3800. So you get 20 watts more per channel in a 2-channel environment on the 4800H. Another commonality between the Denon X3800 and 4800 is that they both run Odyssey Multi-Q XT32, and you can get a Dirac Live upgrade for both of the units. So who is the X4800H for? Possibly if you have multiple amplifiers that only have a trigger input, you would want the AVR that has 3 trigger outputs. Or if you have older equipment that uses legacy connections such as composite or component video, then maybe you would lean over to the 4800. If, however, you like to listen to a lot of 2-channel music and you want that extra power, that 125 watts per channel in 2-channel driven, then maybe you lean over to the 4800. So let's check out the pricing on Best Buy because there's actually 2 different prices. Right here, we see $1875, down from $24.99, so a savings of $624.99, let's say $625. Now, this does not say Black Friday deal, so maybe this will continue throughout the weekend, I'm not sure. Now, if we look at the Best Buy Plus member price, we can see that the price is $1,799. You save $799. So it's actually different on Best Buy's website by about 175 bucks. That's 174 and some change. So if you wanted to get the Denon X4800H, so maybe it would save you some money to pick up the Plus membership to save $175 if you're going with the Denon X4800H. Definitely something to think about. And as I stated before, this price of $1,700, this used to be the pre-COVID price. So the Denon X4500 was $1,700. So this is kind of what I'm saying. This is a good time to buy this particular AVR and the X3800H, but it really depends on what features you need, because the 4800 has everything and more the 3800 has, but a lot of people can get away with picking up the 3800 as opposed to the 4800. And I know some people that pick up the 4800 purely because of the front fascia. It looks a little bit sleeker because all of the buttons are hidden behind the front panel. And another thing that sets apart the Denon X4800H from the lower AVRs in the lineup is that it is manufactured in Japan. And moving forward up the lineup from the 4800 up, all AV receivers will now be made in Japan. And of course, there are people willing to pay a premium for a device that was made in Japan. Are you one of those people? Let me know down in the comments below. Alright, so moving on to the next one is the Denon X6800H. Unfortunately, it is not for sale just yet. It was supposed to release earlier this year, but that didn't happen. So it is slated to come out, I guess, as soon as possible. I mean, everybody's got them on pre-orders. I heard it was going to be December of this year, but it might actually be January or February of next year. So the biggest step up from the 3800 and 4800 is that the 6800 will support 13 channels of processing with 11 channels of power. So let's say if you were wanting to get an AV receiver that powers 11 channel Atmos system like a 7.1.4, you can do that without a power amplifier, okay? So the 6800 will process 13 channels and power 11. And what does this actually do? This means we can run a Atmos system where we have 7 ear level speakers and 6 high channel speakers. It also means we can run an Atmos setup where there are 9 ear level speakers and 4 high channel speakers. So all in all, 13 speakers. Yes, you will need an external power amplifier for those extra 2 channels, but this is really, really cool, right? I recommend a 7.1.6 Atmos configuration as the, I wouldn't say best, but I'd say most optimal for majority of dedicated rooms. In a living room, that's going to be kind of tight, but you know, who knows? You might be able to get it to work, but I will be making a video about that hopefully in the next coming week or 2. So stay tuned, definitely subscribe up. Now, another thing that gets added to the 6800 is another immersive format. So we've got Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, Oro 3D, IMAX Enhanced, and now we have the addition of DTS:X Pro in the X6800. If you're wondering, yes, the Denon 6700 also has DTS:X Pro. And yes, all HDMI inputs have support for 8K along with all the associated HDRs and ALLM, quick media switching, variable refresh rate, all that stuff is still there with the 6800. The 6800, just like the 4800, also has 3 trigger outputs for connecting external amplifiers. It also has the 4 subwoofer outputs, just like the 3800 and the 4800. The 6800 also adds Zone 3, whereas the 3800 and 4800 only had Zone 2. So you get an extra zone with the 6800. Now, if you've watched the channel, you know that I don't like Zone 2 and Zone 3, but hey, it's there. I wish they would take it out and put something better in its place. Come on, Denon, let's go. Anyway, there you have it. The 3800 and 4800 both have a discrete power amplifier, and the 6800 notches that up with also having that along with a monoblock power amp construction. And speaking of amplifiers, the 6800 will output 140 watts per channel into 2 channels driven. Now this is up from the 125 watts per channel into 2 channels from the 4800, and it's a big step up from the 3800 with its 105 power rating. So the Denon 6800H has a lot to offer in that upgrade price, but it is still pretty steep, and it hasn't been released yet, and so it'll release for $34.99 whenever it happens to show up. All right, let's keep going up. Now, I quickly want to mention the great deal on the Denon X8500HA, which isn't the newest line. You know, that would be the one we're going to talk about next. But this is the older model, kind of like the X6700H. And Best Buy does have two different prices on this, depending on if you're the Plus member or not. So this receiver will process 13 channels and power 13 channels out of one box. But we see it's down for $4162.99, savings of $437. However, if you are a Plus member, your price is $3,872, savings of $728. Maybe it's good to be a Plus member. But anyway, that's the 8500H, 13 channels of power, 13 channels of processing. It's pretty much like the Denon X6700H with a little bit more power. It's also a lot bigger. There are a few other options that, you know, like inputs and all that kind of stuff, but we're not going to get into that. We're going to move on to the Big Daddy, the flagship of Denon AV receivers, the A1H. All right, so here we are at the flagship. This thing is a beast. 15 channels of processing, 15 channels of power. So you're able to run an Atmos setup with 9 ear level speakers and 6 high channels. And since this is the newer lineup, we have the option to go 1 subwoofer or 4, whatever you like, or 2 or 3, whatever you can fit in your home theater space. Now, of course, you do have pre-outs for all 15.4 channels. So if you wanted to externally power anything, you can. You don't necessarily need to, but you have that option. And I'm just going to say the price because there is no sale on any of this. This is $64.99 for those that want to ball out, and it's huge. It is massive. I've seen it in person once, and damn, it's a big one. So make sure you have room in your rack if you look up the dimensions, because it is a hefty AV receiver coming in at about 70 pounds. Now, looking at this back panel, I already noticed the legacy composite and component video. Those ports are gone. We do have XLR stereo input for those of you running an audio device that has XLR outputs. And it looks like we're down to 2 trigger outputs as opposed to the 3 on the 6800 and the 3 on the 4800. We do have balanced pre-outs for the subwoofer, 4 of them you can see over here in this XLR output section. And if you do notice, we have 17 speaker ports running along the bottom of the unit. One thing the 6800 had was the monoblock amp construction, which the A1H also has. However, it's separate for left and right. So the left channel and the right channel have their own monoblock amps. That's pretty cool. So you're getting almost everything that's in the 6800. And when it comes to power, the A1H is outputting 150 watts per channel into 2 channels. That's a pretty good amount of power. So for those of you that want a great 2-channel experience, like this one's definitely going to give it to you. So out of the box, 15 channels of power, and it's got power on tap. So there it is, everybody. All the Denon AV receivers. Let me know which one you would buy, which one you would upgrade to, and which one you want to upgrade to, but you know that you probably could just use this lower end one. Let me know down in the comments. And if you want to know more about the function of the AV receiver in a home theater, I made a great video about it. Make sure to click it and check it out because it's definitely got a lot of information, and I go very in depth into AV receivers, separates, and all that kind of stuff. Until the next one, we'll see you next time. Peace.